Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you here with us tonight. Welcome to the other house. I'm sure everyone here will agree that there's no better place to talk about ways to decompress with these sort of lovely trees and lights. And the swimming pool's actually behind us, but we thought it might be a bit distracting if you saw people doing like their front crawl whilst we were chatting. So you can go and see that afterwards, peeking behind now. I know a few faces in the audience, so thank you for coming back to all of our regulars. But for anyone who I haven't yet met here, I'm Francesca Oakerman-White, and I'm the founder of the Beauty Triangle. Now, we're here tonight to discuss stress management. After all, I think we can all agree that stress impacts us in so many different ways, from premature aging to reduced longevity and even our mental health. So what are the ways that we can simply reduce our stress, really essentially stress less, while calming our skin, our bodies, and even our minds? We're going to answer that, but before we do, a little bit of background on the Beauty Triangle. We launched TBT as a way to educate and empower our audiences on all aspects of their health and well-being, and crucially always from a holistic standpoint. But we also launched it as a way to introduce you, our sort of lovely audience members, to some of the most trusted and authoritative voices in the world of wellness. Which brings me very neatly onto our gorgeous panelists that we have here with us tonight, starting with celebrity facialist and founder of the Skinesis range of skincare. Very, very effective, good stuff, Sarah Chapman. Also aesthetic doctor, former surgeon, and also medical director of Aesthetics Clinic in Beaconsfield. And finally, Miss Sherina Balaratnam, getting all my words in a muddle. And finally, Anna Lancaster, who is a very sought-after hypnotherapist and also an RTT practitioner. So we're going to be hearing all about that later. But really, we're here to really learn from them and to understand the key findings in stress management today, whether that's the power of aromatherapy and corrective skincare, or maybe even the sort of rehabilitative therapies and treatments that can restore a sense of calm when we're not quite ourselves. All that's left from me is really to say a few sort of housekeeping things. We'll have a Q&A at the very end, so please save up any questions you have until then. We also have an amazing goodie bag for you all, so please don't leave without that. Skinesis have very, very kindly donated products for us in that it's their de-stress mist, I believe, which is it's like a serum mist. It's completely delicious and your skin will love it. And finally, you should all have a program, I hope, with information on tonight's speakers, as well as a little referral card. So if you'd like us to connect you with anyone that you hear speak here tonight, then just leave your email address, tick the box next to the speaker's name, and we'll do some connections afterwards. That is enough from me. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to hand over to our amazing ladies who we have here tonight, and then we'll get started with the main conversation. So welcome, Sarah Chapman.
Thank you very much. Do I need to take that?
Yeah, we can.
Good evening, everybody. Is mine on? Can we hear? Perfect. I could probably shout, but
we won't ask it. It wouldn't be very. It'd be very stressful.
Thank you for the kind introduction. And actually, you make me feel very rested with your tone of voice. It's all very calm and with the trees, and it's a perfect setting. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being here. And you can say a quick sort of introduction to yourself, and then we'll move through the panel.
So, as Francesca mentioned, I'm a facialist. So I've spent the last, I suppose, 15, 20 years working with people's skin, looking at skin on a daily basis. And actually what you do in a treatment room as a facialist is also dealing with the mind. So we're dealing with a lot of people's kind of daily lives, issues, things that are happening in their lives, and seeing the effect of that on the skin and on them as a person. So my approach in treatments is very much to look at the person on the day, to look at the skin on the day. I don't kind of believe in skin type. You're not just a dry and oily or whatever. You're actually changing constantly depending on what's going on in your life, depending on what you're doing with your skin. So we really look at the whole person and look at the skin condition, not the skin type. So hopefully some of that I can sort of share with you tonight in our conversation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I'm really looking forward to that.
I can't wait to hear what you have to say next as well. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're excited about this session. My background is in reconstructive NHS plastic surgery and burns. I've been a doctor for 25 years. First half of my career was in the NHS for 12 years, reconstructing pediatric burnt skin, followed by adult burnt skin. So I guess the purpose back then was to restore these patients of ours back to functional normality as much as we could, and then also an aesthetic outcome. People want to look and feel good and look good again. But throughout the decades in their lives, whether it's their teens, their 20s, their 30s, their 40s and beyond, we're constantly having to evolve to make sure our patients evolve back into society well. Fast forward the last 12 years of my life, I have left the NHS and I now specialize in regenerative medicine, aesthetic medicine, as we know. So yes, I am a cosmetic doctor. My clinic is based in Beaconsfield, Buckinghamshire. So I'm really excited to be here in London today in such a beautiful, again, stress-free environment, similar to the Shire. And my passion lies in the regenerative sciences of what I do. We specialize in treatments for the skin, the face, the scalp, and the body. And what I've learned over the last 8 years in my private practice is that it's very much a strategic plan that we have for our patients based on a great consultation, as what Sarah says, but also focusing on the anatomy. So I'm here to share with you the link between the brain and the skin and the anatomy and how to link that together to treat that person, not just for today, but to regenerate for the future. So really excited to be here. Thank you, Francesca.
Thank you. That was an amazing synopsis of the entire talk. I feel like if I had to slip out, you could probably moderate it for me, Sherina. Thank you very much. And last speaker is Anna Lancaster.
Hi, I'm Anna, and I'm here to talk about the mind and to listen to what these two ladies have to say. So I'm a listener and a speaker tonight, and I'm going to talk about the mind. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist and a rapid transformational therapy practitioner, which is a very long title. But I am obsessed with the subconscious. I mean, we have our conscious mind, which is our thinking mind, I like to refer to it, and our subconscious mind, which is our feeling mind. And my studies and what I do works very much with the feeling mind, because feeling always wins over thought. You only have to look at an example I use a lot of food analogies in what I do. But for example, if there's ice cream and you're on a really healthy week and you're thinking, I'm not having the ice cream, consciously thinking, and then something triggers you, you have a breakup or you have a stressful day at work and you're at home, the ice cream sat there looking at you, what wins? Your conscious mind going, no, I'm not having the ice cream, or your feeling mind goes to the ice cream? Every time, it's pretty much all, every time, 95% of the time is your subconscious, your feeling wins over thought. And that goes through your life. So I go back to where the feelings are. I work with the feeling. I change how you feel about it. And today I'm going to give you some tips and hopefully help you change how you feel about stress.
That sounds incredible. Thank you, Anna. And really, really powerful. I think such an interesting lineup of ladies. And I can't wait to hear what all of you have to say on the subject of stress. So thank you for joining us. We'll get underway with the main conversation. So our first speaker is Sarah Chapman. She's introduced herself to you. She's an incredible facialist, really renowned for her sort of very hands-on facials that I'd say alleviate stress in the skin, but also in the mind. So Sarah, maybe we can start by sort of talking about how stress manifests in the skin. I mean, if it's left unchecked, what impact are we going to see in the skin long term?
You can see quite a lot from stress on the skin. And obviously when we're really stressed, we release adrenaline and cortisol. Cortisol then has quite a detrimental effect in the skin. So it increases oil production. So what often happens is people get breakouts, they get acne, they're stressed and they're like, no, my skin's bad. And then it sort of increases the stress. So there are a few things that can happen. One of them is that it's the sort of breakouts and acne that come from that kind of cortisol and increased oil production. But there's also an increase in inflammation. So certain skin conditions like psoriasis or atopic dermatitis, those sorts of things are triggered by stress. And anybody that has psoriasis will know that in stressful periods, it becomes much worse. It becomes more angry. It becomes more itchy. Because with that increase in cortisol, your immune function of your skin is reduced. So you can't heal wounds properly. Your skin isn't repairing itself very well. Your epidermal barrier starts to become compromised. So you either have that sort of more breakout prone skin or you've got the reactive sensitivity.
And it's interesting because you just said it yourself, but you know, we break out or we have that sensitivity and it feeds into everything, doesn't it? And then we feel more panicked as a result. And it's the stress is causing the skin condition, but the skin condition equally causes the stress that we then experience.
Yes, and you become sort of more and more so stressed because of this issue that you now have, which was caused by it in the first place. So finding ways to manage stress, I think, in today's sort of lifestyle is really key for so many things. But if you're sort of dealing with chronic stress, so years and years of stress from whatever it is, the other effect that it can have is to decrease your collagen production. So over time of continuous stress that you're going through, you're going to see that slackening in the skin. You're going to see more lines, pigmentation, and general aging of the skin in a sort of very much increased way than you would have done without those kind of years of stress.
And it's so cruel because our collagen depletes anyway from the ages of 25, 26 onwards, which many of us could argue is probably the time in life where we do start to get more actively stressed. You know, we're then in careers probably, in significant relationships, and it's a bit unfair that it all collides in that way, really.
Yeah. Gets harder and harder, doesn't it?
Our poor skin.
Yeah. I think it's about how do you deal with it in those situations? How do you deal with the stress with your mind? How do you deal with it with other things? But also, how do you deal with it on your skin? If your skin is reactive, if it's red, if it's itchy, if you've developed psoriasis or dermatitis, or you're breaking out, and it's things that you don't normally have with your skin, it's actually stopping and thinking, okay, there's something going on and now I need to change what I'm doing. Because I think a lot of people think, well, I use this all the time, so I'm just going to carry on doing what I'm doing. And actually, you've got to reset.
You're so right. Sometimes people are using a product for years and years and it's never causing any complaints for them. And then all of a sudden, the skin breaks out or it gets sensitized. I mean, are there specific topical ingredients on the note of skincare that we should be more mindful of when the skin is coming under stress?
I think so. I think we're sort of in an age at the moment where we're bombarded with ingredients, and there's loads of brilliant active ingredients. And I'm a massive fan of retinoids, your retinols, or your vitamin A's. I'm a massive fan of niacinamide and different forms of vitamin C. They're so good for the skin. But I think because they've sort of come so much into the spotlight, I find that a lot of people are using a lot of quite strong products. And if you're going through that time where your skin, your immune function, your barrier function, everything is compromised on the skin, if you're then loading all of those on, you're going to be making the situation worse. So there are times where actually you just need to pull back. You need to say, I'm going to put all my actives aside and I'm actually going to rebuild my skin, a bit like we would want to do with the mind or with the body. We need to sort of refocus and we need to strengthen, build resilience, support it, build up that sort of barrier function, and then you can go back to actives.
So it's not that we're completely eliminating them for the long term. It's more that we're just sort of allowing the skin that time to recover and regain its resilience before we then reintroduce those ingredients.
Yeah, because your skin won't be able to tolerate them anyway. So as you say, something that you may have used for years just won't be tolerated by the skin because your barrier will be sort of broken. It's a bit like it needs to sort of seal up again and build that sort of strength and resilience.
It needs to heal again, essentially.
Yeah.
And what, conversely, are then the ingredients that we need to be looking for that are going to have that healing, that restorative effect on stressed skin?
The things that I would focus on are omegas, and omega oils, topically applied but also taken as ingestibles, are so supportive for the skin. Every cell membrane needs omegas to stay supple, intact, strong, to hold the water where it needs to be, to hold the oils where they need to be in the skin. And they have done lots and lots of trials over the years with omegas on children with eczema and really sort of aggravated skin conditions, and they've had really good responses. So to build up that sort of barrier and to build the resilience of the skin if it's compromised, omegas and ceramides in your skincare, so that you're looking at replacing all of the lipids, all of the oils into the skin, which starts again to sort of reseal almost that area which has become compromised. Those are the things that I would focus on.
And it gives skin that lovely sort of juicy, sort of luminous quality as well when you start to get those sort of good oils back into it as well.
Yeah, totally. And also comfort, because one of the
100%.
things is when you're going through stress, first of all, you feel that stress, but your skin feels it as well, and it feels irritated, and it feels hot, or it feels uncomfortable, or it feels tight. And what you want is to get that kind of that real comfort and cushioning and nurturing and nourishing back to the skin, which you'll get really well through those oils and lipids and ceramides and omegas.
Definitely. And you sort of spoke earlier about the impact of hormones essentially on the skin, you know, things like cortisol and the impact that has. Is there anything else that you see? I mean, you have thousands of faces and complexions that you must have seen over the years on the treatment table, but is there anything else that you're seeing actively in sort of modern day life contributing to stressed out skin?
I think there's definitely an element of modern life and devices. Firstly, we never switch off anymore. So everybody is on all the time. And if you're on all the
So
time, you mentally not decompressing. You're not taking that stress away for 5 minutes in the day. You're on the phone, you're on the computer, there's stuff happening, or you're on Instagram, whatever it is, it's stuff going on all the time. And that's increasing kind of stress levels. So I think that there's that the stress element of that, but there's also the physical element of devices, high energy visible light, your blue lights, the things that are coming from that constantly attacking the skin. There's been lots of research done now, and it's still not 100% proven, but there's lots of research to show the kind of damage that the long-term use of these kind of devices and lights is having on the skin cells, the oxidative damage, which we need to kind of fight against from the environment every day. There's the mind stress that then affects us, but there's also environmental stressors. So we're constantly
It's coming at us from all angles.
Yeah, and UV light and pollution and all the digital things.
When it comes to the digital devices, what can we do to really shield our skin? I mean, obviously there's the sort of mantra, don't sleep with the phone in the bedroom, sort of try to limit screen time. But I think the reality is, and you just said it as well, we are so plugged into the devices, and we do everything on it. It's messaging, it's calling, it's doing your Waitrose order, it's your emails for work, it's your online shopping. I mean, it's endless the amount of time we can sort of actually spend getting sucked into these devices. So are there ingredients? Is it sort of lifestyle tips? What is it really?
I think there are lots of ingredients now for skincare. We use quite a few of them in some of our newer products, but there are lots of ingredients that are formulated to help to neutralize some of the damage. First of all, an antioxidant's going to help. So that is vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin E, coenzyme Q10. Any of your simple antioxidants will help to fight against lots of that sort of damage. But there are also some newer ingredients that are really designed to be fighting against specific blue light. So you can look for those in products because they will help to defend against that. And I think just, if you can, I don't have my phone in the bedroom. I would never take my phone into the bedroom. And I don't think I've met anybody who also does that. Everyone says, how can you do that? What about your alarm? We have an alarm clock.
I have to say,
I'm really old-fashioned.
Mine is literally right next to my pillow. It's horrific.
I just don't, because it does emit rays, and actually that's going to affect your quality of sleep, which is going to affect so
also
many other things as well.
Also the buzzing constantly throughout the night. I mean,
so you just turn it on to silent.
Oh my God, I'm such an
You
idiot.
hear your messages as well.
Yeah, I know. WhatsApp's going all night long. I mean, it's terrible. I should really just put it in another room like you do. I'm going to go home and change that.
Mine stays downstairs on the charger. Yeah.
Very impressive.
But I do think if you can sort of extract from it, and they do say, before you go to bed, you should leave it for at least an hour before, because also you need your mind and your mental patterns to kind of slow down so that you can rest well when you get into bed. Otherwise, your first hour in bed is actually trying to sort all of that jumble in your head out as well. So we know that sleep is so good for us on so many levels. So I think if we can detach a little bit from devices, it's definitely a help. Other things for skin, of course, is to always wear SPF and your UVA and UVB blockers, because whether you're at a computer screen under a fluorescent light or out in the street, you're being attacked by different light damaging, as we know. So,
and what sort of SPF are we talking about? Is an SPF 30 sufficient every day? Should we be looking at an SPF 50?
I would say you can have SPF 30 throughout the year, but as you get into sunny days and summer months, which we pray for on a daily basis,
especially right now,
you should really move into your factor 50s, just so that you can really give yourself a good protection. And reapplication is key, because I think we forget that as well. If you're putting something on that's in your kind of your daytime skincare routine, how many of us then reapply at lunchtime? Unless you're out in the park and it's sunny, or you're on the beach, you forget about that. And actually you do have to reapply because it gets broken down by light.
You're
and
so
that's
right.
how they measure the SPF value.
When I very recently did one of those sort of Vizia skin analysis, and I could see exactly where my SPF was, and it wasn't all over my face like I thought it was.
Right.
It was literally like clinging to a few areas. So it really does go to show the power of and the importance of the reapplication as well.
Yeah, and you see so many people get sun damage, and actually they put their SPF on every day, but it's only in the morning. And so if they're then out and about, and it could be somebody who literally says, I only go and pick the kids up from school at 4 o'clock. But in the summer, that's enough UV rays to get through into your skin and then potentially start to cause damage. And so it's important, if you can, to reapply it during the day, because there is so much around us that's attacking the skin.
I'm also guilty on that charge. I was really lucky to sort of be invited onto your treatment table not sort of also long ago. And the one thing that I really took away from your facial was that the power of the facial massage as well. And I think that's a really important thing for us to discuss when it comes to the skin, because it's not just, the factors impacting the skin surface and what's going on below it, but also the tension held in the face. I mean, your sort of facial massage is legendary, but is that something that you sort of really aim to sort of restore in the treatments that you offer your patients?
Yeah, totally. And the massage is actually really quite deep, isn't it? It's quite vigorous.
So.
It's like a sort of gymnastics.
It's like deep tissue for your face.
Yeah.
Like I can say that it's incredible.
Yeah, and also strangely relaxing at the same time.
Yeah.
But there's so much tension that we're holding in our faces and in our muscles. And I have so many people who say, oh, I've now got sort of jowls here, or I've got all my eyes have dropped. And actually, as soon as you release the muscles and you let that lift, the eyebrows go up, this kind of lifts up. So we work quite a lot on this big muscle here to release it, because if that's so tight, and I think we all find ourselves doing this, it's pulling down the face here. So it's pulling down the corners of the mouth, it's giving the sort of more of a sad face. So it's not necessarily always due to the collagen loss. Sometimes it's actually due to just the muscle almost so contracted and tense. And then also the muscles here, and how many times I'm doing a facial and I can feel the sort of tension in this part of the face, and I really work it hard.
Is that from sort of teeth grinding or jaw sort of clenching?
Yeah, and I think so many people do that now. If I think now compared to 5-10 years ago, it's totally different. Everybody's got this kind of...
That's so interesting. Yeah. You've noticed that as a trend over the sort of recent years. Wow.
Yeah. And as you massage it, they say, oh, that's really sore, but it's really good. But God, it's really tight.
Oh,
and I say, do you clench your teeth? And they said, I don't think so. But I think there is just so much tension being held.
You're so right. And also you sort of really delve down the neck and almost into the back. And I suppose that's important because it's all connected, isn't it?
And if you really work sort of the back of the neck and around the whole of the sort of trapezius muscle at the back, and you loosen everything up, again, it kind of opens the face. It relaxes the person from a de-stress perspective, but it's also all linked. So it's helping to give a bit of a facelift effect. It's helping to release lots of the tension, but it's also the feel-good factor. Because as we're talking about stress, there's one place you can't look at your phone, and that's on a facial treatment couch. If you're having a facial, you cannot read your phone. Some people
I've been known to sneak mine in.
But, yeah. So it's that moment to sort of stop. I mean, I always say, the most exciting thing about going away somewhere is I can get on a plane and nobody can get in touch with me, and I can't do anything on my phone. I love it. Whereas everyone else is like, oh, I'm not going to have my phone with me. So I think just that time to decompress, de-stress, and release all of that tension, whether it's muscular, and feed the cells with oxygen and nutrients and get the blood pumping, is a massive
sort of get the oxygen back to the skin and get everything moving again. I think that's really powerful. And I'm sure, again, the massage comes into this, but is there anything that we can be doing at home really to sort of improve this sort of quality of our skin, lessen stress, reduce the tension, and sort of effectively calm the body and the mind at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, massage on yourself is a great thing to do, and it's so easy. You sort of don't have to really follow by any rules, but if you put a really great product on that smells fantastic, that feels good on your skin, something that's like maybe slightly oily and it's got a really good smell, put that onto your skin and just sit and massage. Use your knuckles, use your fingertips, breathe, inhale the smell if you've got a good
breathe
smell.
As well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one that we haven't said yet, but that's so important. Yeah. Also not breathing enough.
Yeah, I think it's sort of breathe and stop are the two things that we sort of don't really do, because you just keep going, and then you're like, oh. And if you do suddenly think, right, I'll do some deep breaths. I don't know if anybody does yoga or meditation or anything like that. You're so constricted in your chest, it actually takes you the first 10 breaths to actually fill up your lungs again and to sort of move everything. So I think breathing is key. A few deep breaths, some massage for the skin, and just thinking of the little things that you can do. For example, at bedtime is to use like a nice scented pillow mist, which is, I just think is such a simple thing, but makes a real difference around you, because mentally you stop then and you've got this sort of, you've got this moment that's your pause and you know it's kind of bedtime. I also get lots of people to do their skincare routine when they get home. So if you're out at work or whatever it is and you get home, to get changed when you get home into something comfortable and do your face cleanse and put your night product on, then do dinner and TV and whatever it is that you're doing. Because actually that last few hours of your day then are in semi-relaxed mode. Whereas if you're still in your kind of work clothes, you've still got your makeup on, you haven't cleansed your face, you're still in that frame of mind. And also quite often you then get to going to bed and you're like, I can't be bothered to cleanse my face.
That is such good advice. And you're so right, because otherwise, all this deep breathing, all this lovely facial massage with the sort of aromatherapeutic oils, it just doesn't happen. And we just go, oh my God, is that the time I need to get into bed? And I won't even bother taking my makeup off. And I guess that the power of then having those extra hours with these lovely products on your skin as well can't be underestimated.
Yeah, exactly. So good for the mind, good for the skin. And it's a really simple thing to do. And I've done that change with clients of mine so many times throughout the years. And they're like, I love cleansing now. I really enjoy it because they're doing it when they're not exhausted. And then they're enjoying that sort of moment. They're able to do more massage. They've then got their nighttime sort of products on. And so for the rest of the evening, they can smell that, they can feel that. And it's almost like a de-stressing kind of point for them.
What a clever idea. I'm absolutely 100% going home and doing that as soon as this is finished. Be back with my facial massage and my oils. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was super interesting and really, really relevant and really helpful. So any questions for Sarah, do save them up and we'll come to those at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yes, the microphone being passed on. Well done, ladies. So our second speaker is Ms. Sherina Balaratnam. She introduced herself earlier, but Sherina is the Medical Director of Aesthetics Clinic out in Beaconsfield. Beautiful clinic. If you haven't made a trip out to Beaconsfield, you absolutely must. She is a former surgeon and an aesthetic doctor and has a very high-tech, but also a very holistic approach, I'd say, to optimizing the face and the body. So thank you for joining us, Sherina. It's a real treat to have you here. What is the stress that you're seeing in your patients? Because you treat a wide cohort of women and men in your clinic, don't you?
Yes, absolutely, Francesca. Firstly, thank you so much for having me today as well. And yes, you're absolutely right. I treat a wide cohort of female patients predominantly, some men too. And interestingly, we're thinking about stress. And when Sarah mentioned jawline and neck, the number of fingers touching their faces and their neck and the jawlines just suddenly shot up in the room. So that's just an observation from here. And there's actually nothing wrong with anyone in this room. So this is what I referred to as dynamic stress, positive stress. There's nothing wrong with that level of stress. We might have gone to work, we might have come home, and we're just paced at a certain way. We're managing the kids, we've got to sort them out, we've got to juggle the husband, we've got to manage the pets. There's a lot of juggling and there's a lot of multitasking going on. So there's nothing wrong with that level of stress. It's positive stress, it's dynamic stress, it's how we're paced every single day. But it still influences and affects us, doesn't it? We feel the tension in the chest, we feel the pectorals tighten up. As Sarah was saying, we feel the back of the neck, the trapezius, everyone sat like this. So that's what I call a positive stress. And if I had to score my patients, and I get every single patient of mine to score themselves, 0 to 10, how would you pace yourself every day on a positive stress or negative stress, 0 to 10? And most of my patients actually say about an 8 to 9 out of 10.
My goodness.
And that's high. So if everyone's coming into my practice and everyone's scoring themselves as 8 or 9 out of 10, and that's normal, just think of the influence and impact of that on everything from head to toe. So I'll talk about influences on the skin, influences on the scalp as well. We talk about that a lot in our practice. Influences on skeletal aging, body aging, the 5 layers of the face, the facial fat pads. And that plays a massive impact on everything we need to think about. So this goes beyond the conversation of, should I have a bit of Botox, doctor? Beyond that conversation.
It's much more of a deep dive, I think, what you have to do with the patient, isn't it? And it all starts with that consultation, I suspect.
All about the consultation. So that's just positive stress, the influence of day-to-day life. And then we have to deep dive into negative stress. Now, this is not something that our patients will naturally evolve and talk about, but this is something that I have to extract by a great consultation. So negative stress would be something like, do you have anything you need to share with me, anything in your personal or your professional life? And chances are it's something personal where someone has come to present to us. And they might have lost a child, they might have lost a partner, they might have lost a parent in a very nearby time. Then it might have been a very significant emotional trigger, a death, a bereavement, something like that. And it's something that is very, very strong and relevant because there's a chronicity to it, there's a time frame, and it causes a lot of degeneration in the skin, in the subcutaneous tissue. We call it the connective tissue as well, ligaments in the face. And then we see the facial fat pads. They devolumize very, very quickly when someone is negatively stressed. And there's nothing worse than that because the aging happens very, very quickly.
It's so true. You're so right. When people have really suffered a real loss
Suffering.
or a trauma, they really do. And women, and I'm sure men say exactly it, they feel like they've aged overnight.
Aging overnight. And someone can say, I went to bed last night and I woke up the next day and I look like a different person. It's as if the face just suddenly went katonk overnight. And some of us can relate to that when we've gone through periods of stress, whether it's good stress, bad stress, but it's something that's chronic. So I like to get my patients to give me an idea of their trigger. I'd like to get an idea of the time frame. How long have you been feeling this way? Or how long has this been this way? And if they're saying 1 or 2 months or 3 months, that's one situation. We can act quickly, we can act rapidly, we can get the right positive mindset shifts, and we can work very quickly to reset the skin, face, scalp, and body. However, when it's something that's been going on for about 5 years, or my child has been ill and autistic for 7 or 10 years, or I've lost my child, etc., then this chronicity leads to a chronic inflammation, that cortisol, the stress hormone, all of those things cause a lot of degeneration and decay in the skin. Vascular changes, broken capillaries, disrupted skin barrier, rosacea. We see that every single day. So if we can video, well, it is video, Sarah's conversation, just listen to it because I see that every single day in my practice. So before I go on to the soft tissue fillers, which the patient needs, before I go on to the toxin injections, which most patients actually need as necessary now, because these muscles go into a very tight and negative expression to complement the negative influences of what's happening. I hope that makes sense.
It does. And maybe you can talk a little bit about the effect of stress on the scalp. That's another really interesting one that I think is becoming more and more widespread at the moment. And you've got some very interesting sort of technology that's addressing that.
Absolutely. So moving on to negative influences of stress, we talk about the chronic inflammation. So inflammation causes aging, it causes degeneration, it causes decay, it causes a slowing down of the cellular processes. You've heard of Sarah saying that. So I always talk about aging being a loss of energy as well. We feel tired, we probably are tired, we're probably not sleeping as well as we used to, and then we have the influence of these stress hormones, our natural hormones, and guess what? They're going to play a toll on the skin of the scalp. It's absolutely no different from everywhere else. It's just that in majority of the time, it's covered with hair. So we don't necessarily clean it and wash it to the impact of how we do with our face and our chest and neck and décolletage. So if we're not removing the dead skin and it's congested and it's creating a lot of impact in the follicles and the pores, then that's going to slowly decay. It's going to go through its own inflammation. So as Francesca was saying, we have an imaging suite in my practice in Beaconsfield. And it's really important as part of the diagnostic in the consultation to image not just the skin on your face and the skin on your body, but we image the skin on your scalp.
And what are you seeing in sort of patients today? What do our scalps look like as a result of this sort of long-term sort of chronic inflammation and inflammation and stress?
So Francesca's just used a really exciting word called inflammaging. So that's a combination of inflammation and the natural or accelerated aging process. So take a good, healthy skin. It's going to look bright. It's going to look vibrant. The oiliness, as Sarah was saying, is going to look nice and tight. It's going to look shiny. It's going to look glossy. There's good hydration. But take a disrupted skin barrier in the scalp. It's going to look dull. It's going to look gray. It's also going to look, how do you say, flaky as well if the barrier is disrupted. And it's going to look red. So that's a sign of inflammation. And what tends to happen with the cellular processes within the follicle, they start decaying as well. And the hairdressers tend to spot it. And so next time you're at the hairdressers, ask them, how is my hair doing? How is the health of my scalp? And if you ask your hairdresser that, they will tell you, actually, Dr. Sherina, your hair seems a little fragile at the moment. And that's a sign that you need to start doing something. So in our clinic, we specialize in a type of facial called the hydrofacial Ceravive. It's a designated facial for the scalp. We gently exfoliate, we remove dead skin, and then we push 5 growth factors, peptide proteins, deep into the skin of the scalp to nourish it, to stimulate it in order to grow new follicles and hair.
It's really interesting because you were sort of just talking about sort of how the hairdressers are the first one to spot it. And I think you're so right, that the scalp is something that goes so ignored at the moment. And it got me thinking, we have our hair, our skin and our nails, and they're often the first places that these signs actually manifest, these symptoms come up. The hair breaks, the skin breaks out, the nails start to split. And essentially, the body has to prioritize different organs, doesn't it? And these end up being the areas that aren't getting the nutrients, they aren't getting all the love and attention that they need. And they're not sort of things that we should just be brushing to the side, a flaky scalp or, sort of congested, breaking out skin. They are sort of red flags in a sense. I was, sorry, you were about to say something.
So just going to say they're huge red flags. And we haven't even started talking about the facial aging. We've been talking about skin. We've been talking about scalp. And I'm a surgeon. I'm used to dealing with the anatomy of the face. And I'm talking about 2 very different things here. And it's because as patients, we don't look at that. We're constantly looking at the negative stress, which is the frown muscle. So our patient will come in and say, I don't like this, or I don't like this, or what can you do about this? And this is an end symptom, the jowl, for example, or the lid lagging, or the hooding, or the crepiness. It's the end symptom or clinical sign of so much more complex things that are actually going within that person.
And you really have to unpick all of those sort of anatomical changes, exactly as you were saying earlier, to understand why that frown line is there or that jowl has appeared.
Correct, absolutely. So when a patient presents with a nasolabial fold and they think they might need some filler there, or when a patient presents with heaviness in the lower face and says, doctor, can you just do that to lift me and give me my correction and my volume and loss of heaviness or sagginess, we have to have a great consultation. We have to give you a good diagnostic, and we have to really understand what's going on within that person in order to give you a great treatment plan.
And what's really interesting, the way that you obviously address the face and the body is you look at all the different layers, don't you? You have the skin, you have the fat, you have the muscle. You've slowly started going through all of these.
Correct.
You're working with some really interesting muscle stimulating devices at the moment. And I know we spoke about the power of sort of massage with Sarah and how we can really sort of restore, I suppose, elasticity to the muscles. But how are you using muscle stimulation in your clinic, and what benefit are you seeing in terms of counteracting stress in your patients?
So that's a great question, Francesca. So let's talk about muscles as a whole, and let's talk about our skeletal muscles first, because we're used to thinking about muscles in the legs, muscles in the thighs, our biceps, our triceps. They're a form of skeletal muscle, so they're a different type of muscle. We want to grow them when we're young because we're going through growth spurts and we're investing in that growth for the rest of our lives. And after, as Francesca and Sarah have said, after the age of 25, we can look at CT, MRI scans, we can look at all of these visual diagnostics, and we can see that we start to lose collagen, elastin, the proteins in our skin and our body, hyaluronic acid, which are the sugars that can control water, and we tend to lose skeletal muscle 1% a year after a certain age. That's 10% a decade if we're not careful.
It's
That's
absolutely
fast.
terrifying.
That's actually very fast, 1%. And then us girls go through aging 10 years faster than gentlemen because we have ovaries, we've got hormones. Something else we need to be mindful about.
Goodness, 10 years earlier, I didn't know that.
10
There's some
years
terrifying
earlier.
facts coming out of this. It's supposed to be
A
about stressing
decade
less,
earlier.
stressing
So-
more.
Not to add more stress to the room, but this is important because in 2007 we didn't know all these things. Whereas now we have clinical studies, we've got diagnostics like MRI scan that are showing us these changes. So we actually have the benefit of being a little bit more knowledge, a bit more prepared. So let's look at skeletal muscle. We talked about that. We're losing 1%. We just need to look at our grandparents to see they're going to be shorter, they're going to be smaller framed. So that's where we're heading. So now we're in a situation where we can future-proof our muscles. So we have treatments such as the M-Sculpt and the M-Sculpt Neo technologies. These are from companies that have manufactured devices based on 30 years plus worth of research. They can grow muscles by using energy devices, using muscular stimulation devices with magnetic therapies. They've never been done before, but in the last 5 to 8 years, we've had the benefit of these treatments to actually grow and develop new muscle.
And these all came from a physiotherapy background, didn't they? These devices,
Absolutely.
which is an interesting application that we're seeing medical devices now being used to help us aesthetically, but also in terms of longevity.
Yeah, so we're in the practice of longevity medicine. Our patients are designed to live longer now because we've got modern day medicine, we've got modern day science, but we've also got modern day stresses. So we seem to be making a different shift in paradigm nowadays. We need to live longer, so we need to have devices that are going to keep us stronger to last that length of time. So let's flip from the body to the face. I don't know if any of you feel a little bit of tiredness in your face sometimes, a little bit of inability to keep your cheeks up some days. I've got patients who are in their 60s come and say to me, Dr. Sherina, I'm so tired at the end of the day because I spend all day doing this, because I need to keep my cheeks up to make my eyes look bright and to make my jawline look as tight as it can be.
And the brow as well, sort of people,
And the brow.
sort of, when they start to feel that their lids are almost sort of wading into their vision, they almost start lifting their eyebrows up much more to compensate, don't they?
Absolutely. So we have an analogy in my world. We call it the triangle of beauty, the triangle of youth. And that is your facial triangle, which needs to be widest in the upper pole here between the cheeks, and then it slims down to like a V. So this is how we all start off. Actually, when we're babies, we start off a little bit more round. And then we lose the cute little fat pads, right? And then we svelte up to this triangle, this beautiful triangle in our late teens and 20s. And then as we go into our 40s, the triangle starts changing. It goes from a V, and it opens up to a H, and then it flips the other way, and we get the jowls. Because all 5 layers within the face, the skin, the superficial fat, the muscles, the deep fat, and then finally the bone, they're all changing in a complex way, and we call everything from bone to skin the connective tissue. One of you used the words, the connective tissue. So this is where we're starting to really understand the anatomy, the anatomical changes behind our facial aging. And we understand that skin is aging. We now know that the fat pads are changing in a certain way. We know that from a study in 2007, cadaver dissection studies. But now we're learning that the facial muscles, which are our muscles of facial expression, they're also changing. They're getting weaker, they're losing tone, they're losing their elasticity. And for the first time in our history, in our profession, we can stimulate those.
That's super exciting. And I think, you just mentioned it, but the muscles we have the bone, which is the sort of scaffolding of the face, but the muscles give it shape and structure and expression. And it's a really interesting thing to be addressing. So you're one of the first in the UK to have the M-Face, aren't you? Which is the latest sort of souped up muscle stimulating device for the face. And as Sherina said, it started for the body. It was the M-Sculpt Neo for sort of the flanks and the bottom and the abs and the arms and the legs and everything. But now it's applied to the face, which is genius because you are getting that very powerful, very restorative workout for the face that I suppose counteracts that stress that we might be holding on to.
Correct, absolutely. So let's think of a negative stress or positive stress back on the face. You've got a tight frown line. You've got a tight, this muscle, we call it the depressor. And then you've got a tight chin muscle. So these are negative facial expressions that actually come naturally with the aging process. We all become a little bit hyper-contracted. So we need to tell our patients that. We get tight necklines. So what we need to do is counter that effect and strengthen the muscles of facial elevation. So take, for example, the frontal muscle. We call it the frontalis. It's the anatomical muscle that raises the brow. We like that. For a female, we need a high arch brow, but we also want to look soft and natural. But we don't want to look paralyzed, do we? If you look at young people, they don't look paralyzed. They just look very relaxed. So if we think of anti-aging treatments, if we think of toxin treatments, we're continuously weakening a weakening muscle. And I hope that makes sense. So for the first time, we have a device that's triggering this muscle using electrical stimulation to grow it again, to restore more balance. So that's what this treatment is all about.
And again, I think, to our analogy of strengthening the sort of barrier of the skin so it can become more resilient, strengthening the muscles, working them out like you would do at the gym is only going to sort of foster greater resilience in the face and hopefully sort of reduce that stress long term.
Correct, absolutely. So I feel that this is an adjunct and it's to use in combination with facial injectables, for example. I carry out facial injectables every single day to balance these muscles, to restore the triangle of beauty, the triangle of youth, as we call it. But there comes a point in my practice where I don't want to carry out any more facial injectables on a particular person because we've reached a point where I feel that any more will reach a tipping point. So what else do I need? I need more than one thing in my toolbox. I need a little bit of topical skincare, definitely the massages. We do that every single day. We need to then use botulinum toxin in a very, very concise and accurate way to release the depressor muscles so that it gives the face a fighting chance of actually going up. And then we can bring in these types of energy devices that tighten the skin, and we know it stimulates collagen and elastin, as well as to stimulate the facial muscles. And this is a whole new shift in paradigm to actually take that facial balance and put it back into its triangle.
It really is that layered approach, as much as we speak about skin, fat, muscle, bone, I think all of the modalities that you're talking about here work so beautifully in combination, and that's obviously what gets the long-term results. Final question for you, Sherina. As an aesthetic doctor, people might think that your sole focus is on the aesthetic, the external of the patient, but why to you is this holistic, sort of this inside-out approach so important for lessening stress in the long term?
It's more a necessary now. And when we look at clinical studies looking at the psychology of a patient who's had a treatment, every time I even do a treatment on a patient in the clinic, they automatically look in the mirror and they feel so much better. They smile at themselves. They can see themselves look like a fresher, a healthier version of themselves. It doesn't have to be younger. And automatically, patients tell me how good they feel, or they tell my team.
It's almost like they recognize themselves again, I suppose. You've taken them back to that place where they were happy, confident,
Correct.
Less stressed.
Correct. And we've actually carried out clinical studies, and a number of colleagues of mine in the genetic world and the scientific research world have actually conducted studies using proteins measured on the skin, post-treatments using topical treatments, injectable treatments, as well as energy treatments. And it has clinically shown an upregulation in positive proteins as well as brain stimulation proteins.
Is that the feedback that we're visually getting from the elimination of these negative emotions?
Absolutely. So there's clinical studies that actually show an upregulation in the positive hormones in the brain after you've had certain types of treatments. And that's very significant. So I think we're moving away to treatments that you almost have to do to patients, to treatment that are actually necessary to do to restore the human function of the brain.
That's really fascinating. Thank you very much, Sherina. That was such an in-depth look at absolutely everything I feel that could be possibly happening to us from the inside out. If you have any questions for Sherina, do sort of hold them until the end, and we'll come to you. And that leads us very neatly on to our final speaker, Anna Lancaster.
Thank you. God,
Anna.
I've learned so much. I'm upgrading my SPF ASAP.
I feel the same. My head is completely spinning. But we have, I feel terrible because I'm doing all the things that all of the panelists are saying that you should never do. But Anna, we've spoken about the impact of stress on the skin, the facial tissues, the body. You're our woman who's going to tell us all about the mind. So what impact do you see stress having on our emotional state as human beings?
Yeah, I'm going to kind of stress has had a bit of a bad rep so far. I'm going to come a little to its defense here, because stress, or the impact it has on the body, has a purpose. If we go back, and to do this, I'm going to do a bit of a reframe. If we go back to prehistoric times, 10,000 years ago, what was stress then? Stress was a predatory attack, so like a saber-toothed tiger. If that's coming at you, you want your body to react in that way when your body flushes with adrenaline, cortisol comes, all hands on deck to get you out of like a fight or a flee kind of situation. So you find your immune system goes down, because who cares if you get sick? There's a saber-toothed tiger there. Your whole kind of like body oils come on it that you were speaking about, which kind of make you taste less good to that. Even you'll evacuate the body because you can run faster. Your body works in its best way in that kind of a scenario. However, fast forward to now, we haven't upgraded much. And actually, what is stress to us now? It's the daily commute. It's an argument with a friend. It's deadline at work. It's not the same predatory threat, but our body is kind of reacting in a similar way. And we live in this low-grade stress all of our time. And so it makes us sick. It makes us slow, and it makes us stupid. And they're the ways it hits us. And so it affects every area of your life. You cannot work if you're overwhelmed. So your success level goes down. Your emotional level goes down. You can't cope as well. And it affects every area of your body. And in fact, at the moment, I think they said that at the doctors, 70% of all emissions are kind of stress related at the moment.
My goodness, how terrifying. You're so right, though. It's that low-lying stress that is just constantly hovering in the background versus the, probably the saber-toothed tiger who probably comes out of your cave, I don't know, once or twice a year. It's very different the way that we are living now.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I think that the conversation surrounding sort of stress, mental health is definitely becoming much louder. But for you as a hypnotherapist, I mean, how are you sort of explaining this surge in panic attacks and general anxiety? Is this the low-lying stress that's causing this, or are these other factors at play?
There are a lot of factors, but the one thing that we like as human beings is familiarity and certainty. And we like
routine.
Routine. And we like to know what is happening. We like to know if there's pain, it will last this long. We like to be in control of things. And as you can imagine, recently we had a massive pandemic, which we couldn't control. I mean, who 5 years before that would have thought for 1 second you'd been told to stay in your house, you could not leave, you had no control over your life.
So true.
That would have happened. And when that happens and that control's taken away, it often triggers things which are deep rooted in your control mechanic. And that's what I work with a lot, whereby if you can't control your external life and you can't control internally how you're feeling, it can be debilitating. And I've noticed since the pandemic in particular, and especially with young people, the element of anxiety has increased massively. The element because people have been unable to control their life for quite a period, and it's triggered so many things in different people. And I mean, the truth is, we can't actually control anything, really. I mean, when you look at it, you can't control any external factors. You just can't.
You can control how you react to it, I suppose.
Exactly. The thing is, you can control your mind, you can control your thoughts, and you can control your reaction. And that's kind of quite empowering when you think about it, when it's in that way.
And so who are the sort of clients that you're mainly sort of working with? You spoke about sort of younger sort of people who are now experiencing more sort of anxiety and sort of stress and whatnot, but who generally are you seeing on average who you can help manage stress?
I mean, I work with a real diverse range of people. My background predominantly before this was I used to own a marketing agency in theatre, film and fashion. I had a ready-made fan base there with people because they tend to have a lot of issues. And so they came on board. But then literally anybody with a behaviour that they want to amend, anyone with a stress factor. I work with everything from confidence to stress to eating disorders, which actually they skyrocketed during the pandemic because again that's a control thing. And the eating disorder itself tends to be actually it's a coping mechanic for a lot of people, and it serves a purpose. It's not necessarily a negative thing in their eyes because it helps them.
It's whatever you can sort of latch onto, I suppose, to sort of feel that you've regained some control over a situation which is beyond your control ultimately.
Yeah, totally. And also, like, one of the things that people said to me is, do you have predominantly women come to you? Because they tend to be the ones who seek help. But actually with what I do, because it's quite scientific, I've pretty much 50-50 male and female base.
And you also work with a lot of entrepreneurs, don't you, to almost help them move forward, to come up with, I suppose, sort of fresh content, sort of limit those negative self-beliefs that might be holding them back as well. How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs because women in particular, we suffer from imposter syndrome more than men. I think it's like 70% of women and 40% of men because they know what they're doing, apparently. And so we have like a lot of self-sabotaging behaviours. Just to go give you a bit of a talk about the subconscious and the conscious mind. So our subconscious mind, which is the all-powerful, is created predominantly between the ages of 0 and 7. At that age, we're at a lower brainwave state, we're at what's called theta, which is also hypnosis. And we are literally little sponges, and we take in our environment. We watch everything, and that's when we start to create our beliefs around love, money, our self-worth, self-love, how you treat people, everything. And it's from our parents, it's from school. And at that age, we create a whole belief system. And when you create a belief, whatever it may be, you look for other things to support it. And that kind of creates your subconscious. And then you go through life and you go through life and you get to where we are now, and our behavior is driven 95% by our subconscious and only 5% by our conscious. So you can see how powerful it is when it comes from quite a primitive mind. I have customers now who come and they are running on the beliefs of a 4-year-old and they're 40.
Isn't that interesting? And that's why it's so critical to the way that you work often to go through that regression therapy.
Yeah.
Is that always a part of how you work as a hypnotherapist? You always take people back to that childhood state through hypnosis?
Yeah, it's not always the childhood, but predominantly it does go back there. And with regression, I tend to put them into hypnosis. I don't know if you've ever been hypnotized, but it's just a really relaxed state. It's a really focused, hyper-relaxed state. And I take them into hypnosis, and then I regress them back to 3 or 4 scenes, all to do with where the root cause of the issue is. And I had a woman at the weekend for insomnia, and I regressed her. And the first scene went back to, she was 2 years old, and she was sat there in her cot, and her dad was yelling at her mum and screaming. And at that age, she created a belief that if I go to sleep, something might happen to me or something might happen to my mum.
Oh my goodness.
And then when that happens, you look for other things to support it. And there was a second scene, and actually went back further. She went back to being 7 months in the crib, and a similar thing happened. It wasn't.
People can really recall sort of that far back, can they? My goodness.
Yeah,
That's
and
extraordinary.
and you go back to actually, I mean, it's very, very important to say you don't relive it. You just review it. So you're looking at it, and I deal with it very delicately. But it's often just very curious to look back, and you can start to look at it through the lens of an adult rather than a child. And when you're that child and you create that belief that, you know, if I go to sleep, something might happen. And then it triggers when you're older and you can't sleep because your mind is so clever. Your mind's there for survival. Everyone thinks it's there to make us happy. It's not. If you're happy, you're likely to survive. So, you know, it's good. But there.
It must be such a light bulb moment for a lot of your patients who are sort of lying there, sort of going through this regression and almost sort of discovering what it was, what that sort of initial seed that was planted that has blossomed into this idea that has, you know, caused them so much sort of stress and anxiety throughout their adult life.
Totally, because essentially our lives are a series of stories we make up about ourselves. And I used an analogy earlier whereby you can have 2 children, for example, and they're both adopted. One, the story they tell themselves is my parents loved me so much that they gave up having a child, gave up having love for me because they thought I'd be better with someone else. And then you have the other child who's like, I was so unlovable, my parents didn't love me and they adopted me. Exactly the same thing, but it's the story they tell themselves. And that happens with everything in our lives. Our reality is essentially a base of stories that we tell ourselves.
And those stories are influenced by those experiences that we have between the ages of 0 and 7.
Predominantly, yeah.
Goodness, it's such an important time.
It is. And I have a lot of my friends who have children coming to me going, God, what should I do?
Exactly. I don't want to say anything to my son now. God knows what I'm going to bring him up doing.
I know, but it's one of those things. I mean, I do the best I can. My son, he came to me, and I'm on my mobile phone, the bane of all of our lives, and I'm on there answering bills, emails. He doesn't know at 7 what an email is or a bill is. All he knows is I'm the most important person to him. And then when he's like, mummy, 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 and I'm like, 5 minutes, I'm on this. He could create the belief I'm not as important as that thing to her. And then on its own, often that isn't enough. But then you look for things to kind of support that belief. So then if he's going out at school and I pick him up late, God forbid, or something else happens, it builds up that story with him that I'm not lovable, my mummy doesn't love me enough. That could. Hopefully that's not the case.
My goodness, another thing to add to the list of why our mobile phones are so terrible for us. Do you have any, if panic does set in, if stress does sort of set in and we need to control it quickly, do you have any sort of quick fix, almost tips when we're in that exact sort of moment and we just need to get a grip of the stress that's coming in?
Totally. I mean, the number one thing is tell someone to stay calm because that's going to work. No, joke. No, the one thing is when you're at that elevated state, it's very difficult to go from an elevated state to a very calm state. So going just stay calm doesn't work. The one thing that you can do if appropriate, so if you're kind of in a panic because you've got a presentation or if you have something you've got to do, it's a really good thing to tell yourself you're excited because nerves and excitement have exactly the same bodily reaction. And the only reason your body knows is by what you tell it. So if you imagine, if you're nervous, your heart goes, your eyes dilate, you get the shakes. Exactly the same when you're excited. The one thing I always say, if it's appropriate and you're doing that, tell yourself, I'm excited. And you will notice a shift. And it's easier to go from that very high element to another one. If that's not appropriate, the other thing is, as we covered, breathing. Breathing is, it resets your system. A lot of people, I don't know if you know box breathing, where you breathe in for 7, hold for 7, breathe out for 7, hold for 7. That works. Or Andrew Huberman from, I don't know if any of you know the Human Lab. One of the things that he says decreases stress in the quickest amount of time is to do a big inhale and then do another little inhale and then a long exhale. And he says within three rounds of that, it significantly in their studies reduces stress.
Because you're taking in so much air sort of in that way, aren't you? You're really inflating your lungs.
Yeah, you're inflating the sacs to their full potential and letting out all the carbon dioxide.
It's interesting what you were saying about telling your body that you're excited, not nervous. But there is still an element, and you touched on it right at the very beginning, essentially, when you said don't demonize stress, where we do need a little bit of that almost, to sit up here and perform, for example, to go into the boardroom and deliver a presentation. We do need to still experience a little bit of that adrenaline and that sort of blood running around our bodies, don't we?
Totally. I mean, it's excitement, isn't it? But it's what you tell it. I mean, you get a lot of stage performers. They love that rush. They love it. They go on there to get that rush. I think it's Bruce Springsteen. He goes on stage and he's like, he loves it. It's like sex to him. But it's like, it's good. You can perform at your best when you're at that state, but you've just got to channel it well.
Exactly. It's almost understanding how to manage that. And I think that's a really interesting point to sort of summarize the whole conversation we've had here tonight, because I think what each of you has said, and it's been so interesting to sit here as a listener, really, not just someone asking questions, and understand how all of your approaches overlap. But I think what we are really talking about here is cultivating that resilience, whether it is strengthening the skin, reinforcing the body, or really sort of sharpening the mind and understanding how to use stress to our advantage as well. I think all of us have really touched on this idea that stress can be beneficial. It can get us out of bed in the morning, if nothing else. But it also does need to be managed, and I suppose in that way respected. And that really comes from an awareness of our bodies, and then living life in balance and keeping things in check.
Totally.
I think that's probably all we have time for tonight. If there are any questions, please pop up your hand and we'll sort of come around to you. If you do need to scoot off, then please don't forget your goodie bag, because it's amazing. Your skin will thank you for it. And don't forget to leave referral cards as well if you'd like us to connect you with anyone here tonight. So do throw up your hands. Are there any questions that I can see? There's a lady here. Hello.
I have a question to Ms. Balaratnam. That you mentioned that you double deciding on injectables. Does the muscle walk contraindicate injectables? Because the Botox relaxes and you want to strengthen the muscles. What's going on?
Are we talking? Yes. You got that, yes?
So thank you so much. That is a really great question. So the question for the crowd was the combination of using an energy-based device, for example, to stimulate the muscles of facial expression, does that counteract the influence of, for example, botulinum toxin or Botox as we know it, or a facial filler? Do the two worlds not come together? The answer is, as long as you understand the anatomy, number one, and as long as you understand what you're trying to achieve by each of those individual treatments. So take for example the Botox to start off with. It comes in a solution form, it contains a protein, and the effect is to relax a certain muscle group, okay? So let's just take, for example, what we're trying to achieve with forehead lines. As we naturally age, we actually have a thinner muscle. The muscle's getting lower in tension, it's also getting a thinner muscle. But as a consequence of aging, our soft tissues in our foreheads are also getting less and less. Our skeletal bone is also shrinking. What indirectly happens to the muscle is it starts recognizing that things are starting to slide down into the face. So the muscle starts hypercompensating. You and I don't like that look. So we go and see someone like me, we have a little bit of botulinum toxin, and as we go through our younger years, it looks good, but as we suddenly become our 50s and 60s, we shouldn't be over-treating that muscle too much. So this is where the muscle stimulation device comes in, because it's stimulating that muscle and building density in up to 37%. But all it's doing is improving a resting tone. Have we heard of the word, excuse my French, bitchy resting face? With big nods going up and down. So that is a hyperactivity of other facial muscles which we don't actually need, such as the depressor on the lower face, the chin, and the neck. That is where your botulinum toxin goes. Does that make sense? So all you're trying to do is release those muscles with toxin to allow other facial muscles to elevate. So this device is giving more resting tone in these elevator muscles. So that's the toxin side of things. Did that make sense? Let's now go to facial fillers. So there are 6 fantastic brands of facial fillers in our profession, and they all have scientific data backing them. Take, for example, the one I use, which is a brand called Juvederm, for example. It is stabilized to 100 degrees centigrade. So we know clinically that when you apply a certain type of energy device, whether it's radiofrequency, whether it's lasers, those temperatures really only go up to about 40 to 42 degrees within the facial tissue. So it won't melt your filler at all. The key thing with fillers is know the timing. Timing and sequencing of treatments is really important. So for me, I prefer to do the energy devices first, give it a bit of resting time for the skin to cool, and maybe see my patients in a couple of weeks after that to carry out their facial filler. When the facial fillers are in, I have a certain time frame where I don't wish to treat with energy again, and I bring them back and have it done maybe 6 to 12 weeks later.
I think it's really important on that note actually to say that when you're in the hands of a very capable practitioner, you should really be sort of guided through this process as well, right? Which is
very much
why it's so important to find the right person for you. Were there any other questions? No, we were a very quiet audience tonight. I'm sure our speakers will be here for a few more moments afterwards if anyone did have anything further they wish to discuss. All that's left for me to say really in that case is a big thank you for our amazing Beauty Triangle panel who have been completely fabulous and full of ideas and wisdom. So thank you. And very, very huge thanks to the other house for hosting us so beautifully in such a zen and gorgeous space. I implore you all to go and check out the facilities. It's such a gorgeous venue. And then finally, thank you to all of you as well. It's been such a treat to have you here with us tonight. I hope it's been helpful and inspiring and in some way helped you to take away some simple tips to stress less. I hope you'll all be going to bed with lots of facial massage and phones in other rooms and goodness knows what else. Thank you, and I hope to see you again soon.